What if your next team workshop delivered the results you hoped for? What if everyone believed that the working session was a valuable use of their time and felt inspired to take action? My name is Miriam Hartness, and it is my mission to help you to deliver workshops that work. Today with me on the show is Wouter Smeets. He's a rocket scientist. He's a former innovation manager and now founder of 2 businesses. He founded Glimpse for social innovation for a better world and Prototype U for employee development. And we're going to talk today about workshops as a tool for solution development. So stay tuned. Hello, Wouter.
Hey, Miriam.
I am so happy to have you here, since we have been working together already for a while, for a year, I guess, pretty much.
I think for 1.5 years already,
Yeah.
when first eating ramen in a place in Amsterdam.
True.
And thanks so much for the introduction, introducing me as a rocket scientist.
Yes, I could not.
It's been a long time. I have even introduced myself like that, so feels nice.
You do have a degree in rocket science.
I do have an actual diploma. That's right.
See?
That's right.
So I will call you and introduce you as a rocket scientist. It's actually funny because when people ask me about workshop design or workshop facilitation, I usually say, it's not rocket science. And now you're sitting here with me to talk about workshop design and facilitation and solution development. What's your view as a rocket scientist on it?
Well, to be honest, my days as a rocket scientist are long over, and they were quite brief, to be honest, as well. I think that good facilitation of workshops is really, really hard. I'm not saying that rocket science is easy, but I definitely, so after my rocket science days, I decided to go into innovation, and it's definitely great workshops, great ways of collaboration, which will get us to Mars faster. So perhaps we can use workshops as a means to collaborate with rocket scientists to get to Mars.
That's a nice idea. So you're a rocket scientist. You worked as an innovation manager and traveled the world for that. And what's your story? How did you end up becoming a founder?
The short version of the story is that I started out as a aerospace engineer, and then decided to use my knowledge from human-machine interaction, which was my master's during aerospace engineering, and to apply it to a completely different domain, which I have always liked to see what works in a certain domain and to apply it to a different domain, because that is what makes innovation. And my days, this was at Siemens as the innovation manager for remote control of harbor cranes.
Sounds complicated.
It was kind of complicated. It was also a really fulfilling journey in which we got to innovate or got to create a remote control station for operators of harbor cranes, which normally sit at 50 meters height and unload and load their containers, looking through their glass bottom of the cabin they're sitting in. Mm-hmm. And actually by using sensors, cameras, and network in between, and this operator sitting behind this remote control desk, we were able to create a process where this operator could do this from a remote distance. And like you said, traveling around the world, Dubai, Singapore, China, really broadened my perspective on this world. And at some point, I also had this entrepreneurial spirit, but actually not yet the courage to pursue this drive I had. And I didn't right away pursue founding Glimpse and Prototype U. So there was a step in between. And this was actually at an innovation consultancy firm from only 6 people, where we got to help organizations with their innovation process and organization to help make great products faster, better. But as a real millennial, and when I found the courage, I decided that I wanted to do something meaningful. And something meaningful to me was that I want to help people with their personal growth and professional growth. But also to help initiatives and change makers, empower them to fulfill their dreams of creating a better world. And I had this knowledge of innovation and I wanted to put it to good use. And so the proposition I just told you, it's way too general. So I can recall quite vividly, approximately 1.5 years ago, so I think it was just 2 months before we met each other. I was standing in front of a whiteboard together with Christian. He's the co-founder of Prototype U. And actually the helping people, employees within an organization with a professional development turned into Prototype U, where we apply principles from innovation to actually personal innovation.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and that's really fulfilling to see, to activate people to pursue the dreams they want to pursue. And for me, Glimpse is a way to help change makers initiatives for an equal opportunity and sustainably thriving world to be more effective, to empower them by applying innovation principles to their work. And so actually, I was saying at the beginning, I can recall now that this was going to be the brief version. It's actually not, so sorry for that.
But it's an interesting version. So thanks for sharing.
So it wasn't the in a nutshell version, but the long story short is that it was a journey of self-discovery, initially making a lot of choices externally driven, and taking a lot of steps in between to get to fulfilling companies at this point, because I really love helping people to grow and to help them empower them to.
And I can witness that every time that we are sitting together, working together, or just brainstorming or picking each other's brain. You just mentioned that you started off with human-machine interaction.
Yes.
And this makes me curious that now you're working on human-human interaction. So what did you learn from human-machine interaction that you might be able to apply to human-human, or what are the differences?
Wow, that's there are definitely some principles which apply. So for me, intellectually, I really like to look at systems from a holistic perspective. And for me, it has been a journey from focusing on technology because I thought I liked it to more focusing on people because I really like psychology, the way people interact and how we can collaborate to achieve a certain goal. When looking at human-machine interaction, it was all about safety in aviation. I was working on an air traffic collision avoidance system. And the common notion or the thing you see happen is that a lot of people focus on the sharp end of operation. And when there is a aircraft failing, if there's an aircraft crash, then we tend to blame the pilots for it or the people in control. But there's a lot of things that happen also at the blunt end of operation, like is there a safety culture? Did the pilot receive the right information to do his or her job? Was he perhaps, by all this cluttered information, not able to do this job? And is there a safety culture issue due to which pilots couldn't collaborate in a good way? And I think you can see these elements also happening in workshop spaces where people tend to work together.
Totally.
So this, how people interact with each other. Is there a safe space?
Blaming culture.
Exactly.
Totally.
Blaming culture versus safety culture. So
it's a beautiful analogy, actually. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now that we already made the transition from rocket science to innovation management, from the cockpit into the facilitation seat.
Yeah, that's a different kind of cockpit, right?
Totally. You're also driving the session and you're in charge. You have a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And one thing that I learned from you is the use of templates for the workshop design and also to help the participants to really go from A to B and to develop the solution that we are going to talk about today. What is it behind the templates for you that makes them so powerful?
Yes, so for me, using templates is all about creating a shared mental model for the people in the room. So that when you explain a certain exercise and you already show where you want to capture the results on, it frames the kind of thinking and aligns the thinking in the room. And It makes it easier to really talk about these results together and drive your results to a goal you want to go to. Also, it's quite often really difficult for people to start with a clean slate. So if you have this organization already there, then it's easier for people to add and to understand what's on there and to know what is expected from them.
It becomes so clear to me now. It reminds me of a conversation that I had recently with a designer, and we talked about creativity. And she said creativity needs boundaries. Because if you have too much of space, if everything is possible, nothing is possible.
Yeah.
If you have just this white canvas, it's intimidating. So the template gives exactly these boundaries in which creativity can emerge.
Yeah, definitely. I would even go a step further and say, without boundaries, no creativity.
Yeah. And at the same time, if I understand you correctly, you're also creating the room to share the same language.
Yes, the thing I started with, the shared mental model, is for me incredibly important, just as it's always important at the beginning of a workshop to create a shared understanding of what the actual problem is, instead of that everybody in the room has a different notion of it, because a lot of it is assumptions at the beginning. So you need to start from a common playing field. And this is the same for templates, that you're talking about the same thing.
So how do you get this first stage ready to make sure that everyone in the room knows which problem they're solving, and to also make sure that they're solving actually the right problem?
So starting with the last one, when are you actually tackling the right problem? Looking at solution development, you have these different stages of solution maturity. You can have a proposition, you can have prototypes, you can have a working product, or you can be scaling up a solution. Depending on which stage you are, you have different goals to focus on or different problems to tackle, to take on. So in the end, solution development, for me, and this is going to be a nutshell, is you want as cheaply and fast as possible, you want to learn what works and what does not work. And this means that if you haven't validated that you're actually solving a real problem, or when you haven't validated that a target audience has a need for your solution, then you surely don't want to get together in a room full of people to build that solution, because then you're not tackling the right problem. So first you need to have a look at which stage are we, and how can we test our biggest assumptions right now. So if you haven't validated your proposition yet, you first need to get these people in the room in a workshop or in some other way to validate this biggest assumption before putting all these resources into building a product which might not be a need for. And it sounds perhaps really logical, but you see this happen in practice quite a lot.
Because we have all these biases and wishful thinking and overconfidence going on. So I remember that we often talk about the MOM test, this one book.
Yeah,
definitely.
And
that's a very cheap way to check whether our assumptions are true. We just ask our mom, what do you think about my super business idea?
I really love this book. I cannot stress it enough for people who want to innovate. This is the one book you need to read first. And I'm not kidding, because I should have read it I think 1 year earlier, because I ran into the same problems as the book describes. And what does it describe? Or what it describes is how to ask questions, whether your business idea is a good idea, to validate that in a way that even your mom would give you an honest answer. Because what you see happen in practice is that a lot of people, they are really enthusiastic about their idea, and rightfully so. It's completely awesome to work on something great that you really feel great about. But if you start really enthusiastically talking about your business idea, then what you might get, or probably will get, because we're such social creatures, is a pat on the shoulder, and somebody enthusiastically saying that is a great solution and that you should keep going, which often leads to false positives, because you didn't validate whether the problem you're solving is an actual problem or a problem that is important to to the person you're speaking to. You just received a socially polite response, unfortunately. And this also is the same for example, when you want to validate your solution or your ideas. What you see happen a lot is that people start to practice with relatives, with family. And this, of course, is a really good thing to do to feel more secure in the things you're doing. But it's not a good way to validate your ideas, whether it's good or not, because you really should do so with your target audience in a way that you don't get false positives. So that even your mom would give you an honest answer. So I'm going
Which is a challenge as such. Right?
Yeah, I'm going to plug it once more. Read the mom test. It's really good.
I will put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So obviously, and I think it's an important point to make, that to use workshops as a tool for solution development, we first need to make sure that the solution we're developing solves the right problem.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And a question that comes to my mind is, can templates also be too narrow? To come back to the point we raised earlier on, that creativity needs boundaries. How do you make sure that your templates are still keeping enough space for this creativity?
Good question. I look at using templates as a two-edged sword, actually. So they can really frame it in a good way. But if you are using them in a narrow sense you just described, then it might also harm. And a workshop and the templates you use are again a means to an end. They're not a goal in itself. So if during a session you notice that you're going a different direction and this direction is more meaningful, you should also be able to adjust to your templates. Yeah, definitely.
And what I also realized from working with you is that your templates often are sort of a conversation trigger. So you first generate ideas and then you would use these quadrants, for instance.
Yeah. So for me, I'm really a big fan of first exploring all what is there, what is available, what people have in their minds. And first do this individually in most cases so that every voice is heard. Then for everybody to share their individual findings to the other members of the group. And then you have this big inventarization of everything that's there. And when you have removed the doublings and the things that are irrelevant, then you start to organize them on these quadrants. And since everybody has already explained their own findings, their own post-its, they are really part of this process. And once you start to group, this also creates focus on what's important now, what's urgent, what's important, compared to what could be handled at a later stage, or perhaps even not at all.
So the axis, if I understand correctly, would be importance on one and urgency on the other.
The way which axis you use depends on what you're trying to achieve. So the one you described, if I recall correctly, is the Eisenhower matrix, where you look at which are the work items, for example, or the assumptions, which needs to be known first and which can be known later. So that's the urgency axis. And then you have the vertical axis with the importance, which in the end you want to tackle the important and urgent items first. And then go on to other quadrants. But for example, one other type of quadrant I also use is when you have all these different work items that could contribute to a certain goal. You have this effort axis, so how much time or resources would you need to actually carry out this work item. And then you look at the vertical axis at the contribution to the goals. And so if a certain work item can be easily done, fastly done, and has a high contribution, then you want to do this compared to a work item which costs way more time and perhaps has a contribution to the goal, so that you can move fast and test your assumptions as fast as possible, so to get to your goal.
And as cheap as possible, as you mentioned before, because more effort means more money or more time, more resources in general.
Precisely that, yes.
What I have observed very often in my workshop is that groups would then, when you look at the importance of ideas, that they're very eager to put all the ideas in the high in importance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I still wonder, maybe it's because they want to value each other's ideas and they don't want to criticize someone's idea or your idea wasn't that important. How do you deal with the situation where you see that the group put everything in the upper left corner?
Yeah.
Urgent and important.
Sounds all too familiar. I think you're not alone in that sense. I think there are a couple of things that come to mind. So when people start brainstorming solutions, for example, then often the ones they write down feel important ones, because because even though that's the thing you always do, they're from Seth Godin, the quote.
Good ideas come from bad ideas as long as there are many.
Exactly, that's the one. I love it.
Yeah.
But still, a lot of people refrain from writing down bad ideas, in their opinion. So once they stick it on a canvas, the ideas they have always feel already like important ideas. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we cram the left uppermost corner of a quadrant. And so the way to deal with that is, sometimes perhaps jokingly, I will say, hey, it's a relative skill, to really stress that it's a relative skill. So if you put them in the lower quadrants, it doesn't mean that your ideas are not important. It only means that they're a little bit less important than the upper ones.
It's relative, yeah.
And so what you even could do is if let's assume that all post-its are crammed in the upper left quadrant, then you could even again make a quadrant out of that one and see, okay, let's do this exercise again and see how we can relatively position these items compared to each other.
Oh, nice. So it would be a kind of two-stage clustering where you then you zoom into the upper left quadrant and say, okay, let's do the exercise again with only those post-its.
This could be an option. Yeah. And in some cases, so in most cases, I would say you first urge people or you promote that they're going to do a better job of relatively positioning them. Yeah. But then also when you really want to focus on, for example, if you want to create a backlog out of those items and you have too many on there, then you want to pick a few from that list and you need to do another round of prioritization to not cram your backlog with too much work items, but to make sure that you have a prioritized list of work items where you can reliably plan and make sure that you're actually going to carry them out.
How do you prioritize technically?
There's not one answer to that, actually. So sorry for that.
Would have been too easy.
Depends really on what you're trying to prioritize. So I am also a certified SAFe consultant, which is Skilled Agile Framework, and that means applying lean agile principles at organizational scale instead of only on team level. And there you have this method which is called WSJF, way the shortest job first, where you have a value axis, where you have this value, and then you divide it by the cost of the work item. And then you get this ratio, and the ones with the highest ratio you put highest on the backlog to prioritize them.
That sounds like a big intellectual and time effort.
It's actually not, because you're doing this together, and once you've done this a few times, it goes really fast. Okay. And the thing what makes it great is that you would need to do this together with a team which looks at it from different perspectives. And because you have these different perspectives, what you often see is that there's a different perspective or different notion of what the actual value is of this specific work item, but also how much time it would cost. I remember from my time as an innovation manager that if you would ask salespeople, a work item would be done in half an hour, and if you would ask an engineer, it would be done in 3 years, so to speak.
Maybe the solution would also look differently.
Exactly. And then from an engineer perspective, there's this assumption or notion that they want to have golden doorknobs and to make this beautiful as possible. And from a sales perspective, to not take into account really the engineering work that is required. So when you get these people together and you let them create a shared understanding of the value and the work it takes to actually carry out this item, there's also here again this shared language and shared understanding, shared commitments towards certain work to be done.
I see the beauty for teams because it creates also this sort of empathy. I think it's totally human to think that other people's work is always easier than my own work, right? So, you can do this in half an hour. It's not so difficult.
But your work is the hardest, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I realized that once when I worked with designers, whether it's for my business card, my homepage, or slide decks whatsoever, when I saw the first version, I thought, that's good enough. That's fantastic. And then the designers would get, no, it needs to be aligned and we need to make sure that everything looks good. And sometimes I'm quite impatient. So I thought, why is he making such a fuss out of it? Until I realized, no, it's his job to make a fuss out of it. To make things look good takes more time for a designer because that's their job. So to have their perspective also, as for an engineer in a marketing, finance.
Definitely. Because if you look at teams, and especially look at current complex multidisciplinary projects, and we're getting more and more specialistic in the things we are doing, it's incredibly important to understand each other in an empathically sound way on what it actually is that the other is doing and whether it benefits the whole team or the project. And I think we all have this notion sometimes when we look at something somebody else does and think, hey, how hard can it be? And then when
overconfidence.
And then when you start trying to do it yourself and you think, okay, that's how hard it can be.
Yeah, I tried to update my webpage today myself.
Quite successfully, right?
Yes, but it cost me half a day.
Okay.
I think if I would have been charged half a day for this little update.
But you're rewarded with great amounts of joy, probably, and self-fulfillment.
That's true. And sometimes it's nice to waste time on little things. Before we continue the show, let me take a brief moment to thank our sponsor, Session Lab. Are you using Excel or Word to prepare and schedule your workshops? Try something that is designed for facilitators. With an easy-to-use drag-and-drop agenda builder, Session Lab allows you to be free and creative in your workshop process design. Session Lab also comes with an immense built-in library of workshop activities and facilitation techniques to help you to find new inspiration for your sessions. Stop messing with spreadsheets and focus on designing engaging workshops. Try it as sessionlab.com. I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't believe in its value myself. And when I hear you speaking, especially about the comparison of having an engineer and a salesperson looking at the same problem, and when I think about our topic, which is solution development, I immediately think of who needs to be actually in the room in order to develop solutions inside a workshop space.
Good question. So once more, it also depends on where you at in the solution development stage. I will give an example. If you are running a design sprint, which is a process designed by Google to test really big assumptions in 1 week, or it has or even in a couple of days, where you end up with a user-validated prototype. So to get actual real-world results of whether your solution would work or not. To get to that solution, you need to have the subject matter expertise that is required to get to a holistic, good solution. So that's the subject matter part. But what is also really important is that the right decision-making power is in the room. So it's not only about the solution itself, it's also about creating support to advance the solution you created during that workshop or during that design sprint. Because in the end, if decision makers were not part of that journey, they are more likely to say something like not invented here or it's not that important. And so to make them part of the journey. Yeah, so if you're saying who should be in the room, definitely also, I should have started with that actually, a facilitator. Always have a Miriam or another great facilitator in the room.
You are flattering me. But honestly, why are you saying that?
Yeah, so I'm not completely joking. I'm not joking at all actually, because I think it's really important for a facilitator to be in the room to keep focus on the process, to make sure that you're getting to tangible results. And what it makes it really difficult if there wasn't a facilitator in the room is that you have somebody who's, for example, subject matter expert, is taking his or her sweet time to have discussions, and then all of a sudden also saying, hey, we ran out of time, let's move on to the next topic. So also for the group dynamic, it's really, really important to have a facilitator in the room. And I just cannot stress enough that a facilitator makes sure that all the different subject matter expertise in the room is used to the fullest extent possible.
Yeah, so that every voice gets heard.
That every voice gets heard, and that you really get to the essential learnings there where you want to go to. Because, and perhaps it's a little bit of assumption from my side, but subject matter experts tend to be really enthusiastic about the thing they're doing, and luckily so. But it also means that it's sometimes more difficult to determine whether it's essential stuff they're talking about or stuff that goes too much into detail. Yeah. So a facilitator in the room can really guide this process of making sure that you're sticking to the essential stuff while also keeping group dynamics good.
Yeah. And you mentioned that it's important also to have the decision maker in the room. And for me, it shouts to the IKEA effect. We like things that we have built ourselves.
Yes.
So to make them part of the process, I think that's important. And what I also hear is that the decision maker actually needs to respect the input of the other people who are participating, so all these experts. On the other hand, I also see the problem that then there might be a bias. So if the decision maker only brings in the people he or she considers valuable, maybe they're all yes-sayers.
Yeah. So this of course is a problem. I think that would relate to the culture within an organization, to the way of work so far. So I think when we are running projects, we make sure to help our client to make sure that the right people are in the room. And these are not the people that are on the favorite list of this decision maker. These are the people that cover the different subject matters that are needed to get to a solution. And also a way of decision making that provides the decision maker with good information on what should be the way to go. And one of my favorites in this case is dotmocracy, like a democracy, but then with dot votes. And this is where you give participants a chance to vote on what their favorite idea or solution is. And you could use them as an advisory board to the decision maker. Or you could have a democracy. And it all depends on your project and your solution, whether it should be an advisory board or whether the participants themselves have the deciding vote.
Who decides on the way of voting, whether it's democratic or whether the decision maker has the last word? And how does, to your experience, react the group to that?
Interesting. I would say that when you have in-house innovations, we often use the subject matter experts as an advisory board to the decision maker. And this decision maker often has the bird eye view over the complete process, organization, funding, and therefore has a good position to make this decision on whether to pursue a solution or not. Mm-hmm. Because when you have worked on a solution, so the team in this case, they are quite biased because they think it's an awesome solution because they worked on it. But you're perhaps less able to objectively determine whether it's a good solution compared to all other solutions in the company, in the organization, that can also be pursued. So the second type of project would be a multi-organization project, which we also do at Glimpse, where we assemble or mobilize different organizations and pursue an open innovation project. And here it's not always clear-cut who is the leading organization, and you have a more democratic process on deciding what the solution is to pursue, what to prototype, how to test. And you often don't have one decision maker, or at least it's not an absolute power this decision maker has. It's more a democracy than a dictatorship then.
Maybe also because the person doesn't carry the costs or the responsibility of the decision.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, hadn't considered that yet. But I think when you have the power to make a decision, you should also have the the resources at your disposal to carry this responsibility of making the decision.
Yeah. And for that, so to take the decision and the responsibility, you need to have the bird eye view, as you said, over the entire project and what is possible, probable, and feasible. So we talked a lot about solution development and finding the best solution, then voting. How do we actually know that we are there?
That we're where?
That we found the solution. So you have this workshop, you have different templates, you guide the group to, after defining what the real problem is they want to solve, through different steps. And then when have we arrived?
This is going again to be a consultant answer. It depends. So if you're at your proposition stage, for example, and you want to test whether clients have an actual need for your solution, and they want to pay the cost price that you've established, and you have gained enough evidence that this need is there, and you arrived at this point, then you are able to go to the next stage and start developing prototypes to test in real life. It's not exact science when this moment of absolute clarity is there, because it won't arrive, but it's all about gaining enough confidence that you have proof that your solution will deliver value, and proof that you're able to build it. So that's the feasibility part. And depending on what stage you are at the process, it's all about having enough confidence.
And now I'm curious. It sounds to me as you would then need several workshops where you would go from one stage to the other and leave time in between to test the assumption, or test these intermediate solutions that you came up with, to validate them and then go to the next stage.
Yes, definitely. So often to get to a next stage, you don't just need one workshop. So in this process from getting to, hey, what kind of problem are we trying to solve? What kind of solution do we have? Do we have working prototypes? Do we have a running business model? Can we operate this business model in practice? And once the solution is there, you also want to validate whether it's actually providing the value you thought it would provide, because you only can get to monitor this performance and these benefits once it's running in the real world.
Yeah. And now my question is, what is the responsibility of the facilitator to really help the group to do their homework in between these workshops? What I observed, and that's why I'm asking the question, is that many teams hire a facilitator because they're very enthusiastic to solve this problem. So they will start very motivated, and then you finish the workshop. Everyone is enthusiastic. You do know exactly what are the next steps before the next workshop, and then everyone gets so busy in their daily work that either the next workshop never happens, or at the next workshop you basically start discussing the old issues again just to hide the fact that they didn't do their homework.
It's a pity, right?
Yes.
That's a pity.
Yes. So you observed the same thing.
Yes. And I think so. So if you look at workshops again, so in solution development, you have these workshops where you get people from different backgrounds together, and you create a shared understanding of a solution of the problem. You have a result. And then often, more often than not, the people who are in the room, or perhaps also people who were not in the room, they need to build something. They need to create something. And often this is not something you have to use a workshop type of tool for. So what's really important actually is that you have to capture the results immediately in a workshop. So you can also, for example, use a knowledge worker who makes sure that the results are captured.
What is a knowledge worker?
A knowledge worker can be like an intern, an administrative worker.
It's a nice. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, knowledge worker. So it's basically an assistant.
An assistant, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's a way easier word to describe it.
It's very,
I think that was kind of
polite.
a Dutchism or something, probably. So what's really important is to plan for follow-up and to have resources available for follow-up. And you can have a perfect workshop, but if it doesn't tackle the right problem, if there's not the right, or they're not the right people in the room, or you're not going to do anything with the results, the workshop was a waste of time, unfortunately.
Yes.
And this is something you can prevent by making sure there's support for the solution, so these clear decision-making structures to get the right people in the room, make sure that the workshops, they are a means to an end on the solution development roadmap, and that it's clear once you leave that room what is expected of everybody, and that everybody has the means to really work on those deliverables, so that the next time you get together, we're not going to reiterate what we've already done.
So how I picture it is that at the end you have one final template that would capture the main outcomes and next steps. What is the information that you need to put on this final template, or which fields do you usually put on your final templates?
What we often do is that we start with a report template before the session starts, and we determined what are the goals, so what do we want to achieve in the session. We have the results, so what are kind of clear deliverables at the end in the form of templates, captured results do we have. How are we going to proceed? So a timetable for the facilitator, who's going to do what. And for this assistant,
knowledge worker,
let's stick to assistant. This assistant to capture the results at the end of the session, you have this clear result, but also to have the follow-up already planned. So you have your conclusions. You know how your results contributed to the goals, and you're going to determine right there and then what the next step should be, and also who's going to do that. Yeah, and then you've also established your follow-up.
Okay, so basically on the final template you have the problem, the goal, the steps, deliverables. So I guess these are smart deliverables that you can measure that are specific enough. Who's in charge and until when they need to be delivered.
Yeah, those are the things that come to mind at the moment.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Time is running. At one point in every podcast interview, I always come to this point, time is running.
Oh, no.
And then I realize that I haven't asked my standard questions. So then usually my standard questions then come at the end. What makes workshops fail?
Workshops fail when I think I covered a few of them already, but so to reiterate, when you can have a perfect workshop, but if there's no follow-up or you're tackling the wrong problem, then it failed in my perspective. If you have the wrong people in the room, if you are too strict on following the process, so a great facilitator should also know when it's good to divert from the process that was initially designed. And I think this skill really defines what makes a good facilitator and what doesn't. So to really be able to read the room
Yeah.
And to know, not just to dogmatically follow a certain procedure, but to know the shit you're doing and to know your intent. So what is the thing you're trying to achieve? And if you notice that there's a better way of achieving that goal, then you should definitely do so and not stick to instructions.
Yeah. Do you have a better way than just gut feeling?
I think it's often more than gut feeling alone. I think from experience, and if you're an empathic facilitator, gut feeling can be really good instruments to know whether you should do something differently. Because it also means that you have your eyes and ears open and you notice the signals from the group. But really specifically, if you have a certain exercise and you have a certain template and you expected that template to be filled with information, but there's not getting any information on it, then you need to do something different, and then you need to be creative and creative on the spot when everybody expects from you as a facilitator that you will help them out of this mess.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm always also really appreciate and I value facilitators who are able to do this so effortlessly when there's tension in the group or when a certain exercise doesn't work the way as expected, that they just can effortlessly do something different.
Change the agenda.
Change course in a way that the participants don't even know that is happening.
Yeah. I guess that's just practice, right?
Yeah.
Doing it over and over again. And having a bigger toolbox of potential exercise that do work.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? In the end, also these exercises are tools. And you use different tools for different errands.
Yeah.
And I think this is also one of the things which make a great facilitator, that you know that these are tools and that you know which tools to use for what kind of errands.
Totally agree. Before we close, I always ask the question, if someone in the audience fell asleep after minute 1 and woke up now, what do you want this person to take home? What is the nutshell of our conversation?
I would say workshops are a means to an end. Make sure to have the right people in the room to tackle the right problem, to make sure that all time and energy of the people are spent in the best way possible. Make it fun. I didn't talk about it in the show, but make it fun as well. Everybody is allowed to have fun.
Yes, and we remember better when we have fun.
Definitely, and I think this also relates to our philosophy within Glimpse and Prototype U. That when we are young, we play. We learn by playing. By falling, by standing up. And at some point, we don't do that anymore. So I would encourage everybody to keep learning by playing, by experimenting and...
falling down and standing up.
Yes, literally and figuratively.
Yes, nice. Thank you, Wouter. Before we turn off the microphones, if someone in the audience now wants to learn more about you, work with you, hire you, chat with you, how can they reach you?
You can reach me in different ways. You can look at one of our 2 web pages, prototypeu.nl, glimpse.nl, or you can contact me via email, wouter@glimpse.nl, .nl I should say. And of course I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to ask me any questions you might have. Feel free to reach out and I will get back to you.
Perfect. And I will put all of that in the show notes.
Great.
Thank you so much, Wouter.
Really my pleasure to being here. And keep up the good work. I love it, what you're doing.
Yay. Have a nice evening. Doei.
Doei.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.